Welcome to our channel, your gateway to the most spine-chilling tales and unnerving true stories. Today, we present a harrowing true account, The Shadow in the Attic. Get ready to be on the edge of your seat as we delve into this unsettling narrative. But be warned, comfort is the last thing you'll find here. The Thompson family, consisting of parents Sarah and David, their teenage daughter Emily, and young son Benjamin, are moving into their new home on Elm Street. It's a quaint, two-story house with a sprawling front yard and a large oak tree in the back. The family is excited about the new beginnings and the prospect of making this house their home. Little do they know that their new home harbors a dark secret. As they unpack the last of the boxes, Emily, a curious and adventurous girl, starts to hear whispers from the attic. At first, she thinks it's just the creaky old floorboards, but the whispers seem to be coming from all around her. Intrigued, she decides to investigate. She creeps up the creaky stairs and carefully opens the attic door, revealing a dimly lit, dusty space filled with old trunks and boxes. The whispers grow louder as she steps inside, and Emily feels a chill run down her spine. She sees a shadowy figure moving around the attic, but whenever she tries to get a better look, it disappears into the darkness. She follows the figure, careful not to trip over any of the loose floorboards, until she reaches a corner of the attic where an old, worn-out rug is laying on the floor. The figure seems to be hiding underneath it. Curiosity getting the better of her, Emily kneels down and pulls the rug aside. A malevolent shadow leaps out at her, engulfing her entire body. She screams in terror as the shadow begins to drag her across the attic floor, toward a strange, glowing portal that has appeared in the wall. Before she disappears completely, she manages to drop her flashlight, leaving it behind in the attic. Downstairs, Sarah and David hear Emily's screams and rush up to investigate. They find Benjamin cowering in a corner, tears streaming down his face. "Mommy, Daddy, what happened?" he whispers. They don't have time to answer before they see Emily's flashlight lying on the floor, its light flickering eerily. A cold sweat breaks out on their foreheads as they realize something is terribly wrong. They search the house, calling Emily's name, but she doesn't respond. The whispers from the attic grow louder, more insistent, as if they are trying to warn them of something. As the night wears on, they begin to suspect that Emily might have wandered into the attic and disappeared. But even as they contemplate the grim possibility, they can't shake the feeling that there is something else going on. Something sinister. The next day, the police are called in to investigate Emily's disappearance. They search the attic thoroughly, but find no evidence of forced entry or any signs of a struggle. They also discover that the glowing portal has disappeared, leaving only an ordinary wall behind. As they leave, the Thompsons are left to grapple with the reality of their daughter's disappearance and the ominous whispers that still haunt their new home. Days turn into weeks, and weeks into months. The family grows more and more distant as they struggle to cope with their loss. They move through their days in a daze, unable to shake the feeling that Emily is still somewhere in the house, just out of reach. The whispers continue, taunting them with their helplessness. One night, as David is sitting in the living room, he hears a faint knocking coming from the attic. He gets up and slowly climbs the stairs, his heart pounding in his chest. He opens the attic door, steeling himself for what he might find. But the attic is empty, the only sound the distant whispers coming from the darkness. Is it just his imagination, or is Emily trying to reach out to him from beyond the veil? As the years pass, the Thompsons continue to live in their haunted home. They paint over the scratches on the walls, mop up the puddles of water that mysteriously appear in the night, and try to ignore the whispers that seem to follow them everywhere they go. But they can never truly forget Emily, or the malevolent shadow that stole her away. And they can never escape the feeling that their daughter's disappearance is somehow tied to the malevolent history of their new home on Elm Street. The town of Springfield was abuzz with whispers and speculation as news of the mysterious disappearance of the Thompson family spread like wildfire. Emily's best friend, Sarah, couldn't help but feel a chill down her spine as she listened to her parents and neighbors discuss the terrifying events that had transpired at the Thompson residence on Elm Street. Strange occurrences had begun to plague Sarah's own home as well, and she couldn't shake off the feeling that something sinister was afoot. One night, while Sarah was doing her homework at the kitchen table, she heard footsteps creeping up the stairs. Her heart raced with fear, but she steeled herself, convinced that it was just her parents returning from their late-night errand. To her horror, however, it was not her parents who entered the kitchen. It was the same shadowy figure that had haunted Emily and now seemed to be stalking her as well. The figure stood motionless in the doorway, its malevolent presence filling the room. And then, with a chilling whisper, it spoke. "Sarah, you shouldn't have been so nosy." Terrified beyond words, Sarah tried to scream, but no sound came out. The figure stepped forward, its ebony tendrils reaching out for her, and she felt herself being drawn into the darkness. Just before she was completely consumed by the shadows, she managed to break free, falling to the floor with a thud. Her parents, alerted by the commotion, rushed into the room to find their daughter cowering in a corner, her eyes wide with fear. "Sarah, what happened?" her father asked, his voice trembling with worry. Shaking with uncontrollable sobs, Sarah struggled to find the words to explain what she had experienced. Finally, between gasps for air, she managed to tell them about the shadowy figure that had been haunting her, just like it had been haunting Emily. Her parents exchanged worried glances, and then her mother decided that they needed to investigate the attic, just to be safe. As they climbed the creaky stairs to the attic, Sarah's heart pounded in her chest. The air up there was thick with dust and a sense of foreboding. Her father flicked on the light switch, but nothing happened. Using flashlights, they began to explore the attic, their voices echoing eerily through the empty space. After a few moments, Sarah's father let out a sharp gasp, pointing at a section of the ceiling where the paint had begun to peel away, revealing a hidden door. With trembling hands, he pushed the door open, revealing a small, dark room filled with strange artifacts and occult symbols. The three of them exchanged worried glances, knowing that they had stumbled upon something terrifying. As they began to explore the hidden room, they heard whispers from the shadows, calling out to them, beckoning them closer. With a shudder, they realized that they had discovered the source of the malevolent forces plaguing their town. Deciding that it was best to leave the room immediately, they carefully closed the hidden door and made their way back downstairs. Once they were safely back in the kitchen, Sarah's father called the local authorities, who promised to investigate the matter further. The townspeople were warned about the dangers of the hidden room, and extra precautions were taken to protect their homes from whatever evil lurked within. In the weeks that followed, strange occurrences continued to plague Springfield, but at least now the townspeople knew they weren't alone in their fight against the darkness. Emily's disappearance had brought them together, and they vowed to stand strong against the sinister forces that threatened their peaceful community. As for Sarah, she could never forget the horrors she had witnessed that night in the attic, and the knowledge that the shadows were always watching, waiting for their next chance to strike. As the townspeople become more frightened, the local priest is called upon to perform an exorcism on the attic. The ceremony is intense, with loud chanting and the swinging of holy water, but to no avail. The shadow remains unperturbed. The priest confesses to the town that he believes the shadow is a manifestation of the collective fear and guilt of the townspeople, feeding off their negative emotions. The sun sets over the town of Elm Street, casting an ominous glow across the sky. The air is thick with anticipation and dread as the people gather in the Thompson family's yard. They are here to witness the exorcism that will hopefully rid their town of the malevolent shadow that has been terrorizing them. The priest, Father O'Malley, stands at the foot of the attic stairs, his robes billowing in the breeze. His face is etched with concern and determination as he addresses the crowd. "My dear parishioners," he begins, his voice strong and clear, "we are here today to confront the evil that has infested our town. It is a shadow that feeds on our fear and our guilt, and it must be stopped before it claims any more innocent lives." The crowd murmurs in agreement, their faces pale and their eyes wide with fear. Father O'Malley ascends the stairs, his hands clasped tightly in prayer. He enters the attic, the only light coming from a single candle he carries. The air inside is heavy and oppressive, as if the very atmosphere is weighted down by the darkness and the malevolence that lurks within. The priest begins to chant in Latin, his voice echoing through the attic, bouncing off the walls and the ceiling. He swings the holy water, spraying it over every corner and crevice, trying to cleanse the space of the evil that dwells within. But it is to no avail. The shadow remains, unmoved and unperturbed. Father O'Malley's face falls, and he emerges from the attic, his shoulders slumped in defeat. The townspeople look on, their hearts heavy with despair. The priest addresses them once more. "I am sorry, my friends," he says, his voice choked with emotion. "But it seems that this shadow is stronger than any force we can muster against it. It is a manifestation of our collective fear and guilt, and it will only grow stronger as long as we allow it to feed on our negative emotions. There is a moment of silence as the people digest this information. Many of them look down at their feet, ashamed and frightened by what they have done. Finally, a woman raises her hand, her voice shaking with emotion. "Then what can we do? How can we stop it?" she asks, her voice trembling. Father O'Malley looks at her kindly, his eyes filled with compassion. "The shadow can only survive on our fear and our guilt," he says. "To defeat it, we must first confront our own demons, and learn to forgive ourselves and those we have wronged. We must find the courage to face our fears and stand united against the darkness. Only then will we be able to drive the shadow away from our town and restore peace to our lives." The crowd nods solemnly, understanding the priest's words. They exchange glances, each person taking a step forward in the fight against the shadow. As they leave the Thompson family's yard, they hold hands and walk together, their faces set with determination. They will not be defeated by fear or guilt. They will overcome their own demons and emerge stronger than ever before. And they will not rest until the shadow has been driven from their town. The town of Maplewood was abuzz with excitement, fear, and confusion as a team of paranormal investigators arrived in town. They were led by the renowned expert in supernatural phenomena, Dr. Emily O'Connor. Their mission was to study the malevolent shadow that had been terrorizing the Thompson family and the townspeople alike. The investigators set up their equipment in the Thompson house and began their extensive examination of the attic. Over the course of several days, the team of investigators worked tirelessly to uncover the origins of the shadow and find a way to defeat it. They set up state-of-the-art cameras and microphones throughout the attic, capturing every sound and movement made by the shadow. They also brought along a variety of high-tech equipment, such as electromagnetic field EMF detectors, thermometers, and geophones, in hopes of finding any unusual readings that might shed light on the shadow's nature. As the investigators worked, the townspeople gathered outside the Thompson house, watching them with a mixture of awe and apprehension. Some were hopeful that the investigators would be able to solve the mystery and restore peace to Maplewood, while others feared that their efforts would only anger the shadow further. The investigators were initially fascinated by the amount of activity they were recording. The shadow seemed to be constantly moving, its shape shifting and changing as it darted across the walls and ceiling. They also recorded a strange humming noise, which seemed to emanate from the very fabric of reality itself. However, as they delved deeper into their study, they began to realize that their efforts were having little effect on the shadow. In fact, it seemed to be growing more aggressive and active by the hour. One afternoon, as Dr. O'Connor was examining some of the older documents she had found in the attic, she stumbled across a reference to a long-forgotten ritual that was said to be able to banish malevolent spirits. Intrigued, she decided to attempt the ritual, hoping it might prove effective against the shadow. She gathered the necessary materials and began to perform the ancient rite, chanting ancient incantations and waving burning sage around the room. The townspeople, hearing the commotion, gathered around the house once again, their curiosity piqued. As Dr. O'Connor completed the ritual, a strange energy seemed to emanate from her body, surrounding the shadow. For a brief moment, it looked as if the shadow might be weakening. But then, with a sinister laugh, it broke free from the ritual's grasp and lashed out at Dr. O'Connor, knocking her unconscious. The shadow's attack sent shockwaves through the townspeople, many of whom fled the scene in terror. Those who remained stood in stunned silence, watching as the shadow retreated back into the darkness, its malevolent presence still hanging heavily over Maplewood. The paranormal investigators packed up their equipment and left town, their failure to solve the mystery leaving the townspeople feeling even more vulnerable and afraid. As the days passed, the shadow continued its reign of terror, growing bolder and more aggressive with each passing hour. Emily Thompson, now the town's sole surviving member of the Thompson family, found herself haunted not only by the shadow in the attic, but also by the knowledge that it was somehow connected to her family's past. She knew that she would have to find a way to defeat the shadow before it destroyed everything she held dear. The small town of Springfield was once again plagued with fear and uncertainty. The shadow that lurked in the attic of the Thompson house had claimed another victim, a group of brave teenagers who had decided to confront the darkness head-on. As their families and friends mourned their loss, the townspeople gathered at the church, hoping for some sort of solace or explanation. Reverend Thomas stood at the pulpit, his voice trembling with emotion. "We must not lose hope," he began. Even in the face of such evil, there is always a light that can guide us through the darkness. His words were meant to comfort, but they only served to remind everyone of their own helplessness. The truth was, no one knew what to do about the shadow anymore. The paranormal investigators had failed, and even the local priest's exorcism had proved futile. Eden, the young boy who had survived the attack in the attic, sat in the back pew, his eyes wide with fear. He couldn't bring himself to speak about what had happened, and he didn't know how to explain the darkness that now filled his mind. All he knew was that he was lucky to be alive. Later that evening, as the townspeople began to disperse, Sarah, Emily's best friend, approached Eden. "Eden," she said softly, taking his hand in hers. "I'm so sorry about Emily. I can't even begin to imagine what you must be going through." Eden looked down at the floor, his shoulders shaking slightly. "It's not just Emily," he whispered. "There's something wrong in that attic. It's not just a normal shadow. It's alive." Sarah's eyes widened in fear. "You don't mean?" She trailed off, not daring to finish the sentence. Eden nodded solemnly. "I saw. It had teeth," he stammered. "And it pulled Emily into the darkness. I couldn't do anything to stop it." Sarah squeezed his hand tightly. "It's going to be okay," she lied, her voice trembling. "We'll find a way to stop it." As the two friends walked home together, they could feel the weight of the shadow hanging over them. They knew that whatever they did, it would change their lives forever. But they also knew that they couldn't simply sit back and do nothing while the darkness continued to spread. Somehow, they had to find a way to defeat the shadow once and for all. The next day, Sarah and Eden met at the library after school. They spent hours poring over books on ancient mythology and folklore, hoping to find some clue as to what the shadow was and how they might defeat it. As they read, they discovered stories of other shadow creatures like it, beings that fed on fear and negative emotions. The more they read, the more they realized that the shadow was not just a local problem, it was a global one. "Maybe," Eden suggested, "if we can find a way to make the whole town stop being afraid, the shadow will lose its power and disappear." Sarah nodded thoughtfully. "It's a risky plan," she said, "but it's all we've got." They spent the rest of the afternoon brainstorming ideas, scribbling down notes on scraps of paper. Finally, they had an idea. They would hold a town meeting, where they could share their research and try to rally the citizens of Springfield together against the shadow. The day of the town meeting dawned bright and clear. The citizens of Springfield filed into the community center, their faces a mix of curiosity and trepidation. Sarah and Eden took the stage, their voices trembling with nervousness. They shared their research on the shadow and its connection to negative emotions. They spoke about the power of hope and the importance of standing together against fear. As they spoke, they could see the audience beginning to react. Faces that had been filled with despair now showed glimmers of hope, and as they continued to speak, the hope grew brighter, becoming a beacon that could not be ignored. When they finished, the crowd erupted into applause, and people began to talk in hushed tones about the possibility of defeating the shadow. The next few days were filled with a new sense of purpose and determination. The townspeople began to clean up the graffiti and repair the damage done by the shadow. They painted over the dark symbols with bright colors, replacing them with symbols of hope and unity. They started to talk to one another, sharing stories and offering support. And slowly but surely, the darkness began to fade, replaced by a newfound light. Finally, one evening, Eden and Sarah decided to venture back into the attic. They climbed the creaky ladder, their hearts pounding in their chests, and faced the shadow head-on. To their surprise, the shadow did not attack them. Instead, it simply dissipated into nothingness. As they looked around the attic, they realized that the darkness had gone, replaced by the warm glow of a newly restored light. The shadow had been defeated, not by force, but by the power of hope and unity. And as they climbed down from the attic, Eden and Sarah knew that they had saved not only their town, but perhaps even the world. The shadow would never return, for the light had banished it forever. And in its place, a new spring had come to Springfield, a spring that would never fade, no matter how dark the night might become. The once vibrant town of Elmwood is now a shadow of its former self. The eerie silence that hangs in the air is almost deafening, as if nature herself has abandoned this place. Storefronts are boarded up, windows are covered with newspaper, and the only movement comes from the occasional car that passes through, its occupants hurrying to leave this cursed town behind. Eden's parents, their hearts heavy with grief and guilt, pack up the last of their belongings. They know deep down that they cannot save Emily from the shadow that has taken her, but they cannot bear to leave her behind. They climb into their car, tears streaming down their faces, and begin the long drive out of town. As they look back one last time, they see Emily standing in the distance, her features obscured by the darkness, beckoning them back. Their hearts wrench at the sight, but they know they must go. They can't save her, but maybe someone else will. As they drive away, they hear her voice calling out to them, growing fainter with each passing mile. They clutch each other tightly, not wanting to let go, but knowing they must. The town fades into the distance, replaced by endless fields of tall grass and sparse trees. The further they get from Elmwood, the more they begin to realize how much the town has changed them. They used to be happy, content people, but now they are haunted by the memories of Emily's voice, the sight of her standing alone in the darkness. They wonder if they will ever find peace again, if there is a place in the world where they can escape the shadow's grasp. Eventually, they reach a small town nestled in the hills, its streets lined with quaint shops and friendly faces. They pull into a motel, exhausted from their journey, and try to find some semblance of normalcy in this new place. But no matter where they go, they cannot shake the feeling that the shadow is still there, waiting for them, watching them. They wake up the next morning, the sun streaming through the window, and realize that they must face the truth. They cannot go back to Elmwood, not while the shadow still holds Emily captive. They must find a way to live with the guilt and the fear, to find some sort of peace in the midst of this nightmare. As they sit in the motel room, sipping coffee and staring out at the world beyond their window, they begin to formulate a plan. They will find a way to stop the shadow, to save Emily, and to bring peace back to Elmwood. It will not be easy, and it may cost them everything, but they owe it to their daughter to try. With renewed determination, they pack up their things and hit the road once more. This time, they are not running away from the darkness. They are running towards it, ready to face whatever horrors await them in order to save Emily and the town they once called home. Years have passed since the fateful events that transpired in the small town of Elm Street. Aiden, now renowned paranormal investigator, has spent his adult life studying the supernatural and honing his skills in the hopes of one day returning to his hometown and confronting the malevolent shadow that haunted his childhood. His obsession with the shadow has led him to become a celebrity in the world of the paranormal, and he has assembled a team of experts to help him in his final mission, to free Emily's spirit and put an end to the shadow's reign of terror once and for all. The team arrives at the now dilapidated house on Elm Street, the memories of their childhoods flooding back like a torrent. Aiden, now in his early 30s, takes a deep breath and approaches the attic door, his hand trembling slightly as he turns the knob. The musty smell of dust and mold fills his nostrils as he ascends the creaky stairs, his footsteps echoing through the darkness. The rest of the team follows closely behind, their flashlights illuminating the way. As they enter the attic, they are greeted by the same whispers and shadows that haunted them as children. But this time, Aiden is prepared. He has brought with him a variety of high-tech gadgets and devices, designed to help them communicate with Emily and disrupt the shadow's hold on her spirit. The team sets up their equipment, careful not to disturb any of the ancient artifacts or relics that litter the attic. Hours pass as they monitor the activity in the attic, analyzing the whispers and shadows. Finally, they detect a faint energy signature emanating from the center of the room. It is then that they realize that the shadow has taken on a physical form, a grotesque, malevolent creature that feeds on the fear and despair of its victims. Aiden nods to his team, and they spring into action. One member uses a device to amplify Aiden's voice, allowing him to project it throughout the attic. "Emily, can you hear me?" he shouts. There is no response, but the shadow seems to grow restless at the intrusion. Another team member begins to play a soothing melody on a violin, hoping to calm the shadow and make it more vulnerable to their attacks. Meanwhile, another member of the team attempts to physically engage the shadow, swinging a holy relic at it with all his might. The relic connects with the shadow, causing it to shriek in pain and recoil momentarily. This gives Aiden and the others the opening they need. They swarm the shadow, surrounding it with a barrage of flashing lights and deafening noises. The shadow thrashes wildly, its form beginning to flicker and dissipate under the onslaught. As the shadow's energy begins to dissipate, they feel a sudden sense of loss. They have destroyed the shadow, but they have also freed Emily from its grasp. Aiden approaches the now empty spot where the shadow once stood and kneels down, tears streaming down his face. He reaches out a trembling hand, feeling around for something solid. His fingers close around a cold, metallic object, Emily's missing flashlight. He turns it on, illuminating the attic once more, and breathes a sigh of relief. The team gathers around Aden, sharing hugs and tears of joy. They have done it. They have saved Emily and freed the town of Elm Street from the Shadow's malevolent influence. As they make their way down the creaky stairs and out of the house, they feel a weight lift off their shoulders. The townspeople, once frightened and huddled in their homes, emerge from their hiding places and rejoice at the news. Aden stands at the center of it all, his gaze fixed on the horizon, where Emily stands waiting for him, her arms outstretched in welcome. The years that follow are peaceful ones for the town of Elm Street. Aden continues to work as a paranormal investigator, using his experiences with the Shadow to help others who are suffering from similar supernatural afflictions. He and Emily find a way to put the horrors of their past behind them and build a life together, filled with love and happiness. And as for the attic where it all began, it remains empty and untouched, a testament to the courage and determination of Aden and his team, and a warning to any who might dare to disturb the peace they have so carefully preserved. The air in the attic was thick with tension as Aden and his team of experts prepared for the final confrontation. They had spent months planning and gathering information, and now the moment of truth had arrived. Aden took a deep breath, steeling himself for what lay ahead, as the others readied their equipment. "Are you sure you want to do this, Aden?" his friend Sarah asked, concern etched on her face. There might be another way. He turned to her, his eyes filled with determination. "No, Sarah. This is the only way. We have to end this once and for all." He nodded to his second-in-command, who pressed a button on a remote control. With a groan, the attic door swung open, revealing the darkness within. The team fanned out, each taking a position as they had practiced countless times. The silence was deafening as they waited for the Shadow to appear. It seemed to hover just out of sight, taunting them, daring them to come closer. And then, with a flash of movement, it struck. Aden felt a chill race down his spine as the Shadow hurtled towards him, its tendrils of darkness wrapping around his body. He fought against the darkness, summoning all of his strength and willpower. To his surprise, the Shadow seemed to resist less than he had expected. Was it weakening? He wrenched himself free from the Shadow's grasp and took a step back, panting heavily. The Shadow hissed and lashed out again, this time targeting one of his team members. Aden dashed forward, throwing himself between the Shadow and his friend. He felt the tendrils of darkness wrap around him again, but this time they were less powerful. "Now, everyone," he shouted. "We can do this." His team moved as one, their weapons flashing in the dim light. The Shadow thrashed about wildly, its form growing more distorted with each passing second. It seemed to be fighting for survival, but Aden could see that it was weakening. With a final, desperate surge of energy, Aden lunged forward, driving his sword deep into the heart of the Shadow. There was a blinding flash of light, and then the Shadow was gone. The attic was silent once more, the air still heavy with a sense of foreboding. But this time, there was hope. Emily's spirit appeared before them, her features etched with relief and gratitude. "Thank you, Aden," she whispered. "You freed me from this darkness." He stared at her, unable to speak for a moment. "Emily," he said finally, his voice thick with emotion. "I'm so sorry for everything you've been through." She smiled subtly. "We all are, Aden. But now it's time to move forward. To heal our town and put this behind us." He nodded, taking her hand in his. "Together, we can do it." Outside, the townspeople gathered in the streets, their faces pale with fear and hope. They had heard the commotion from within the attic and knew that something momentous had occurred. As Aden and Emily emerged from the attic, the crowd parted to let them through. "My friends," Aden called out, his voice strong and clear, "the Shadow that has plagued us for so long has been defeated. But our work is not yet done." The people looked at each other uncertainly, their eyes filled with doubt. "What do you mean?" someone called out. "Are you saying it's really over?" Aden smiled reassuringly. "Yes, it's over. But to truly heal, we must face our fears and confront the darkness that lies within each of us. We must come together as a community to support one another and help those who are still struggling." There were murmurs of agreement from the crowd, and as they listened to Aden, they began to feel a sense of hope and determination welling up inside them. They had survived the Shadow's reign of terror, and now it was time to reclaim their lives and their town. Hand in hand, Aden and Emily led the way, their steps firm and sure. The townspeople followed, slowly at first, but gaining confidence as they went. They began to talk and laugh, sharing stories and shedding the burdens of fear and guilt that had weighed them down for so long. The sun was setting as they reached the center of town, painting the sky with hues of red and gold. Eden raised his hand, silencing the crowd. "Tonight," he said, his voice ringing out clear and strong, "let us light a candle for those we have lost, and for the new beginning that lies before us." The people nodded, their faces solemn but resolute. As one, they lit their candles and held them high, a beacon of hope in the gathering darkness. The shadow might have been defeated, but the true test would be rebuilding their lives in its wake. With determination and courage, they would face the future together, as one. Thank you so much for joining me on this cinematic journey. If you enjoyed this video and want to see more like it, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe to my channel. Have you experienced a spine-chilling horror that left you trembling? Share your terrifying tale with us by emailing nightmarenetwork@hotmail.com, and we'd be thrilled to feature it on our platform. Until next time, happy movie watching.